everyone, welcome to another horrific review. This one has been on the back burner for a while. I finally got finished with Stephen King's It, the book, and then as you saw from the unboxing, I got the 90s version and the 2017-19 movies. So what I did, we read through the book, watched the two series, and just the whole point is to do a bit of a deep dive into it. It could take 5 minutes, or we could be here for a while. Really depends. So first off, general impressions. The book was a slog. I'll not lie. And I like books. I like thick books. I love reading. But I just found with the book, because King goes off in so many tangents with side characters. So you start the main story, then go off in like complete tangent with a side character, bring you back. And yes, it might be okay for world building, but it really does take away from the story when you're trying to sort of move through the main plot. It can be a bit distracting. So I definitely find that a bit jarring, especially towards the end. Even the final battle scene, he switched it between the adult the adult losers and the child losers, both encountering Pennywise. Which I don't know. I just found it, especially when you're reaching the climax and like a final battle, jumping the way it did, I didn't really enjoy. Apart from that, decent. One thing I've mentioned this a few times, but one thing I've noticed about Stephen King and his work, he really despises ordinary working class people. That's become apparent. See it in Cujo, you see it Christine, you see it quite a lot of his. But if you're a janitor, a mechanic, you collect dustbins, you are just horrible and evil and abusive and all the stereotypes you can imagine. Which stereotypes are for a reason. But at the same time, so it seems to be an American thing. It's actually worse, I think, in America than the UK. And the UK has a very rigid class system. But I think America is actually worse in terms of its disdain for just ordinary working people. Which I think is mad, because if somebody gets up, goes and does a day's work, an honest day's work. Now you get shirkers at all levels, you get grifters at all levels. So it's not just the working class, you get them at all. You get middle management, you get directors, you get consultants, you get all sorts of people. They'll not put the effort in. So that's not just consigned to one profession or anything. You see that across the board. I've worked with quite a number of people over the years, so I've seen it. But you also, in the same hand, you have salt of the earth people just want to do an honest day's work and get on with their lives. So I don't understand the complete disdain. And seeing the way Stephen King tweets, everything else, like he's completely ideological and bitter. And it's sad. And he's actually put me off him. And this might have influenced my reading of the book after so long, just having a picture of the person. I try and say separate the art from the artist, but if the artist is being a complete tit and winding me up, I don't know. But there you go. I consider myself working class. Yes, technical. Yes, not somebody who works on minimum wage, but I'm not the director of a company or a millionaire. Bit like that. I've worked with people, for people who've been great and terrible. It's just the human condition. There's something you have to put up with. But I just don't understand the malevolence. Is it a trope? And I don't know much about where he grew up in the area, because he focuses obviously in the main area, that part just outside Boston, which is fair enough. But there's obviously something's went on there, and I'm sure there's documentaries and all sorts, but I really couldn't be bothered going into it. Just not worth my time. But yeah, it actually soils his writing and storytelling because of this like hatred he has, and it shows in this. I think this is the most. He did it a bit in Pet Sematary as well, and he uses the outside force created, but it makes sense in this. But the kind of shades through the like small towns. He hates the people of small towns. He hates communities. It's always the same. As he's stuck in a rut, and it's just that's been his trope, and he's become successful over it, and he just repeats, rinses and repeats. Could be that as well. I don't know, but there's something there jarring. I'm starting to see, and it's putting me off the stories, which I might otherwise enjoy. The reason I got the book was through the subscription. If you saw my Abominable Book Club unboxing, I don't think now I would personally go out of my way to purchase a Stephen King book just to read. That's where I'm at. Not that I'm going to waste my time. I don't going to hate watch or palm, but when you see somebody with that amount of bitterness in them towards what I consider people like myself, just want to, pardon me, bloke, just wants to go and do his thing, get on with life. Yeah, don't appreciate it. So it comes up, but we'll set that aside. That, like I said, I think that coming through as well, and the fact that the book keeps bouncing off the main storyline to spend so much time on side characters and not so much the idea behind the creature and the universe. Find a bit jarring, but there you go. The 1990s miniseries that was created for TV. It is closer to the book in terms of the structure. So it starts off with young girl. She's kidnapped, turned out to be a latest victim. And then we've got Mike Hanlon, who stayed behind, and it's in the present day in terms of storyline and him reaching out to the rest of the Losers Club. And then it goes through flashbacks in their past. I've actually forgotten it was structured this way. It's been that long since I watched it. But it works. And I think the TV show does a lot to tidy up where the book went overboard. And this is not normally when you do a book adaptation, you're always complaining that it's not true to the book. And there are changes, we'll go into that, but with adaptations, you're always complaining that it's not true to the book, or it didn't include this, didn't include that. One thing I'm glad, both the movie as well, it's kind of hard. I remember saying to want me just to focus part one, but it's actually difficult to do when I thought about it because of the structure of the 90s miniseries. It's not clearly defined in the part one, chapter one, chapter two, which the movies are. And you can understand why, because the 90s it was TV show. People are taking their time watching it. It's in the evening. When you go to the cinema, you're expecting a big spectacle. So the format gets changed again. So even the medium in which a story gets adapted will influence how it turns out. And you have to kind of have that expectation. I think I get fed up with people who just go in and just moan for the sake of moaning. I find it exhausting. So there we go. Really appreciated the way the 90s version that it's aged in terms of the effects. So the special effects is aged, but it still holds up. The 2017, 2019 movies have actually done a decent job as well. So what I'll not say with this is that one is superior to the other. Both have their own merits. Both have their shortcomings. But once again, when we talk about reboots and remakes, we're always saying the original's better. This isn't the case. What the movies did was, once again, they've adapted, in my opinion, an overbloated book, an over expositionized book, and trimmed it down for an audience to enjoy. So the TV series did it one way and the movies did it another. Both, I believe, have stayed true to the main story, both have made certain strange changes which I don't get, and some have left parts out. So that's across the board. You can't really sort of compare one to the other, but it's apples and pears. It really is. What I'll do, yeah. So what I did was I sort of wrote the name of sort of losers and the main sort of characters, and I'll kind of go through them here one by one and my sort of impressions and how they're acted. I'm not going to pan child actors. Child actors are child actors. One or two characters are stronger as the kids one, but I'm going to focus more on the adult characters because it makes more sense. So let's start off. Bill Dambra. He was played by Richard Thomas in the 1990 version. And if you remember, probably the older ones among us, but you remember a TV show called The Waltons back in the day? He played John Boy. I can't even remember much about that show, but one thing I remember when I did watch it the first time, I saw him like, oh, there's John Boy. Oh, he's playing an author again. What the hell? Because it was this big family of like about 19 million of them in a house. And it was a TV show. It was like a Saturday morning, Sunday afternoon TV show, feel good family type stuff. And always finished off with the night. They're all saying night night, and the lights went on and off. So I can't remember much more about it. But yeah, that's when I made Richard Thomas jump the line. And I haven't seen him in anything else. So ever since that TV show and he did it, I cannot remember him in another thing. It's very strange. Did this end his career? Not that he gave a bad performance or anything, or that this did badly, but he kind of disappeared off the radar. This is the only thing I can think of that he was in. Was he too distinctive? Because he is quite distinctive. You know, like you get a Hollywood star and you just see them, and it just becomes that actor in the role, and they can't morph into the role. Was that maybe his issue? But then back in the 80s, 90s, that was the thing. You didn't want. I remember Dread, where Sylvester Stallone had to take off his helmet because he had to be seen as Sylvester Stallone, which annoyed me. That borderlines in horror, but it's not quite. There's a lot to unpack in that comic series, but there you go. So yeah, he gave a decent performance. Yeah, no issues. We'll have in the 2019 version, Chapter 2, we'll have James McAvoy. Now, in my opinion, James McAvoy is a fantastic actor. But at the same time, he didn't overshadow Richard Thomas's performance in this, if that makes sense. He gave it his own flavour, but he played Bill Dambra. He didn't play James McAvoy. And one thing about James McAvoy, he does morph into roles. And he's got a heavy Scottish accent. He just makes it disappear. Unlike me, I can't do that. I'm kind of inbuilt. So he had decent training. He just, he's not James McAvoy in a Scottish accent. He just becomes Bill Dambra. So a lot of points there. But I don't believe one was better than the other. The child actors, pretty much the same. They didn't. Not one overshadowed the other. They played the roles quite well, and no complaints there. Next, we have Mike Hanlon's character. He was played by Tim Reid in the first one. And the thing is, he's one of them. Tim Reid's one of them faces you think you know, and he's got one of them voices. You think you've seen him in loads of stuff. And then I looked at his back catalogue, and I haven't really. It's very odd. We just got one of those voices that instantly is recognizable. And then Isaiah Mustafa played Mike in the 2019 version. Thought he's pretty decent. Once again, these two, there's not one given a bad performance and a good performance. They both gave a good performance. I think it was more warming towards Tim Reid's version. I think because he was a bit older, Isaiah looked a bit young, but sort of hipsterish, but he still gave a decent performance. But I think he got more of the fatherly warmth of Mike Hanlon, which I associate with the character, because he ends up, he's the one that stayed behind. He became the lore keeper, the sort of one that brought them together. Now, Bill's character is the leader of the group, the sort of beating heart, but Mike is the father figure caretaker of the Losers Club. Each has their little roles. I just thought Tim Reed's did a slightly better, but I'm really splitting hairs with this one. The child actors, same again. Child actors, both great. Playing Mike, can't fault them. So yeah, and the movie changed Mike's trajectory slightly than the TV show, and actually the movie version brought it closer to the book than the miniseries did, which I thought was a bit strange. Apart from a couple of things that we'll go into in that bit, but generally, Mike Hanna's character portrayed well in both. The actors did a decent job, so I can that. Beverly Marsh, she was played by Annetta Toole, and she's, if you remember, Smallville, and God, what else? She was in quite a bit. She's a big name at the time. And Jessica Chastain, who I'm not too familiar with, apart from this. Adult Beverly, I don't know, Annette she brought a softness to her character, and the way she interacted with the Losers Club as an adult was a bit more intimate than Jessica's portrayal, if that makes sense. But once again, both give decent performance. What I would say though, Jessica had more of the fire in her, because Beverly's character is tough. Let's put it. She's kind of down to her, and she's looked down upon, and she's got a resilient toughness in her. That came out more in the 20s version than the 90s, if I'm honest. And that's not disparaging, just back about the child actors. The child that played her in the 20s version definitely far superior. This is really weakness in terms of child actors. The one that played Beverly in the 90s show was much presenter. She was very soft and sort of dowdy, and that was. But especially when she was the one that was going to deliver the killing shot, not the Pennywise at the first battle, you don't see that toughness in her, which I was kind of looking for in the 90s version. Didn't see it. The wee kid that played there in the 20s version, much better. You had that sort of spunkiness about her, which I thought was really cool. Richard Tozier, Richie. The Harry Anderson played the original one, and Bill Hader played the 20s version. I have to say the 90s version is far superior. The Richie portrayal, I couldn't get the grips with Bill's portrayal. We know Richie Trashmouth. His bluster and his voice is all projection against his inner fear. We know that. And I think the 90s version showed that out, that his voice got louder the more excited he got. That was his way of coping, was to be loud. And then, but that guy that played him in the 20s was just, he took me a minute to warm to. Now, there's a couple of scenes, yes, but I just didn't get the same impact. Where we saw Harry, he played in the 90s, and you saw him go in the toilet, he couldn't face them, and then he put on the persona, and then you see the persona break, and you got that whole thing where you didn't build portrayal. I put meh, if I'm honest. I wasn't blown away by it. Eddie Kasperick. Here's another one where the 90s show didn't do as well. Even the child actor played Eddie, very, very wimpy, very beaten down. I know there was that, but at the same time, the kid that plays him in the 2017 version had a bit of fire about him. So he was, as he started growing with his friends, he got a bit of fight and spunk in him. And there's a whole scene in the book in the hospital when he broke his arm, which they glossed over, I think, in the 90s, and then they did it in the 20s version. But the whole thing when he broke his arm and ended up in the hospital, and his mother comes and bans him essentially from seeing his friends, and he has this conversation with her, and that strength was in him. You didn't see that in the 90s version, but in the 20s version, you did see that in both the adult and the child versions. I didn't like Dennis Christopher. His adult character, I didn't gel with, because he played too much, I think, on the weakness and the fragility, and he forgot to include the other part. There we go. Stanley Uris. He was played by Richard Mazur in the 90s version, and Andy Bain in the 20s. And this is where the 20s version, once again, is superior to the 90s, because the child actors, I think the 20s did a better version of him in the child actors as well, because we saw the cold logic. There's a cold logic that runs through Stanley, and he detaches himself from emotion and thinks things through, including a suicide. Where in the 90s version, they just had it that he freaked out and was terrified, and we never got the payoff. And actually, this is something I think they didn't do in the book, because I actually just finished it about half an hour ago before I started this. That's how I was struggling through that much to go. I was struggling through it because he kept bouncing back and forth to different things. I'm like, come on, man, let's get this done. And that's bad when you're reading the book. But yeah, the Stanley character in the 90s version just wasn't there for me. Remember, they're losers, yes, they're outcasts, they've got their fallacies, but the whole point is these guys coming together was it made them stronger, and then they got to focus on their strengths coming out. And I didn't see it with Stanley's character in the first one. Also, I didn't know why he wore a scout uniform the whole time. That was weird in the 90s version, when he was always wearing a scout uniform. It was like, dude, you wear it in your parade nights, but you don't wear it all the time. Raking as well, doing stuff, but it was just odd. Even if you're doing something outside and you're not in full uniform, you can wear your scarf. I remember doing, even as an adult instructor, if you're doing something that was a group, you put the scarf on to show because each unit had its own colours of scarf, and that's kind of how you told people apart. I don't know if it's the same in America, but it's Scout Association anyway. That's the way it worked. But I don't get the whole wearing a scout uniform the whole time in the 90s. But it kind of made him a bit of a cardboard cutout character, which was a shame, but definitely give him more depth in the 20s version. And I appreciated that. Who's next? Ben Hanscom. He was played the adult version, John Ritter, and the 20s version, Jay Ryan. He's the Jay Ryan version, the 20s version, another meh. Bit of a waste of a character. John Ritter really nailed it as the adult. Ben, bringing his character and bringing the fact that he used to be overweight and living his high life. He was just better portrayal. The Jay Ryan character was sick a couple of times. That was his thing. It was just I didn't feel him. Even the whole love thing between him and Beverly, because that was always the thing, the unrequited love between Ben and Beverly, and the fact that Ben watched from afar, knowing that her and Bill had the connection, and he was prepared. Like, the book does it really well in that sense. It tells how he's happy as long as she allows him to love her, sort of thing. She can be in love with whoever she wants, as long as he knows that he can love her too, and even from afar. I thought John Ritter did it better, especially when Pennywise tricks him. Both child actors were cool, so in fairness to their portrayal, no issue with the child actors. They both did a decent version, and they played into the whole. Yeah, they moved there from Texas, didn't know anybody. Pierre just wanting to get on. Trying to think. The whole family dynamic, I think, was played out slightly better in the 90s version. But then moving to their sister's house after everything happened and stuff, and did a wee bit in the 20s, but I think the 90s version played that out a bit better. Yeah, and that's a Losers Club, so that's all the characters in the Losers Club. On to, obviously, the main character, Pennywise. If you don't worry, if you're maybe new to the channel or new to the genre, or have skipped this completely, which is perfectly fine, nothing stopping you jumping in. One thing I will say is I hate elitists in the horror genre. You haven't watched this, well, you're not a real horror fan. But they can have that. You know, that's what I say to people like that. You're just a condescending prat. I have no time for you. If someone hasn't encountered this show, that's why I'm doing these sort of deep dives to give you an idea. If you've maybe only watched one and not the others, or you've not read the book, that's perfectly fine. Everyone's got their own things in lives, and you maybe haven't had a chance. Here might be a chance, an opportunity if you go and do it, if you so wish. Just had to get that out there because I hate elitist socials. But Tim Curry, 90s version, Bill Skarsgård. Could I remember Bill's name? I was calling him Alan and all sorts a couple of nights ago, being a moron. But you can't compare these two. They're both portrayed the character. They both gave their versions of Pennywise. What I'll say is, obviously, the 90s version is restricted because of technology. But that doesn't take away from Tim Curry's performance. And Bill Skarsgård isn't, by any means, a pale imitation. He took Pennywise and made it his own. There's one particular scene. I know everyone makes fun of the dancing scene. That's fair enough, but they just played it. But there's one particular scene in part 2 where he's meeting the wee girl on the bleachers. He entices the wee girl out, and that whole thing where he's pretending to cry and stuff. Brilliant. That's where he made the character his own. So I don't think you can really say one's better than the other. You could nitpick certain scenes, but generally both made the character Pennywise come alive. So I can't complain. I was actually quite happy because you know what it is when remakes and when they do reboots, you're always worried that you're going to be disappointed. But in this case, can't say a word. I like Bill Skarsgård. Paul's his brother or something. Should maybe wrote that down. But Skarsgård brothers are in pretty decent roles, and they seem to have embraced the horror genre. That seems to be their main thing. When Bill was in American Horror Story, and he's recently in Barbarian, which I can't wait to actually get to see. Bit annoyed about the cinema with that. Was it Paul was in the Northman? Was Bill? But I mean, they both got their own movies and their own flavors, but they're sticking close to. They're not doing like mainstream stuff, which is cool. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that. I know it might seem like sitting on the fence, but genuinely can't fault either of them. I can't say one's better than the other because it's both used. If you'd taken Bill, put him in the Pennywise costume of the 90s and acted like that, he wouldn't do the same Pennywise because of his performance. But he'd work, you'd see the character come through, same as Tim Curry. If he was given the CGI stuff, he'd still just amp up his own performance, and that's what you want. Henry Bars, in the 90s version, I did not like the young version. He was a cardboard character. He was cardboard cut out of a character. Didn't gel them at all. The old version, the adult version, was decent. Kind of liked them. In the movies, both young and old, were decent. I enjoyed them. I like the younger version better because at least they went into a bit of the dynamics between him and his father, even though they changed the father's character slightly. But you kind of saw that he was a damaged person And then that translated. Both the adult versions played the roles. There were only really bit roles in the second half, like the modern, the adult versions. He was just a tool at the end of the day, and he played the role. So kind of, I think the younger version had a bit more of a character arc. Definitely, the younger version in the '90s series, just yeah, he was just there. Victor and Belch, nah, they were just Victor and Belch. They were henchmen, not really much in it. I liked Victor's reanimated character in the '90s version better than the '20s when he reappeared, because it was too CGI. There's too much CGI in the 2019 version of Victor's character reappearing to Henry. Wasn't fussed. I liked the way they did it in the first. The dog bit was a bit, yeah, they tried to do that too literally and it didn't work. And then finally, in terms of the side characters, Butch Bars in the '90s version not even mentioned. And even in the book made a big thing about crazy Butch and the fact that he pickled his son's head, and it was his malevolence was poured into Henry, and Henry didn't really have a chance. And he just glossed over completely in the '90s series, which annoyed me. In the 2019 or 2017 version to be didn't last. He wasn't the same man. It just wasn't the same character. Yeah, they tried to do it a bit, but it just wasn't. This man was a raving lunatic who had lost his grip in reality. In fact, it had him completely absorbed. And he was ranting and raving although he worked on a farm, he didn't, because here in the 2017 had him as a security guard or a police officer or something, where the Americans with badges and uniforms and guns. You can't tell the difference between a flipping security guard at a shopping centre and a flipping crack special forces troop. They all flip more the same crap. It's funny. But yeah, it wasn't the same character. It wasn't Butch Bars, but at least they included them. So I'll give them points for that. But once again, both disappointed because this guy was off his nut. He was consumed by the entity of it. I don't think there's really much. I didn't include any other characters because they're kind of the main ones that stay together. You probably got the sheriff, you got other ones, but they weren't really there. Bill's parents, they were part, but they weren't enough or focused to give you the idea. Yeah, so I put the Young Losers Club, Eddie, Beverly, and Stan, stronger than 20s version. Yeah, so that's kind of what I said. Right, so let's go into the changes each version made from the book. I probably missed a few because I was trying to read the book. I wasn't sitting diligently taking notes through it. It's not a studying exercise. What I do is experience it. I want to experience it and then get my thoughts as if it just when I sit down, put it down, want to talk to somebody. That's kind of the format of the show. But let's have a look at some of the changes. Let's start with the '90s version. Changes made from the book, which were notable. First of all, they changed the cycle of Pennywise to every 30 years rather than 27. Now, I don't know why they did that. It didn't make sense to do. I don't know where that came from. I can't see a significance in changing that, but they made a big thing about every 30 years, which, once again, I don't know. It's not that hard to get a calculator out and go 1958 plus 27 plus 27 plus 20. I don't know. It just makes no sense. But it wasn't like they glossed over it. They made a note that it was 30 years, which clearly states every 27 and gave the dates. This is what I don't understand about. Let's before we dive into this more. Why do studios or adaptations feel the need to change strange things? When you've got a character and you've got a story, it's busy laid out. All you're doing is translating it from one medium into another. I think it's the hubris of directors that they think they have to put their own spin on it or change something to make it theirs. It's maybe they feel guilty for doing it. I don't know, but just use the source. If the source material has been deemed good enough to be adapted in the first place, then just stick with it. I don't understand the need to change things. The only time I say the need is if you physically can't portray it, or it's not going to work when you translate it on the screen, which we'll get to later on. But the whole thing with the turtle, we didn't need that. It didn't need to be portrayed on screen, so it makes sense not to have the whole spacey scene at the end. But simple things like characters' makeup when they're describing a book, just stick with it. There's other writers write different characters. If you're looking for something specific, go and find another material, but just use what it is, especially certain plot points. It just makes no sense. But yeah, there is that. Eddie lives with his mother in adult form. Sounds like a manga from transformation. As an adult, Eddie is still living with his mother, and he's not married. I don't get why they had to make a change. That because the whole point of the story was he married someone like his mother after his mother died, so she still had a grip on him after death. But like I said, Eddie's the weaker character in the 90s version anyway. That really didn't do him justice. But I don't get why he did that. It makes no sense. We know what his mother was like. And they changed her character as well because she was a big person, but they had her like a wavy, thin, weird thing. Yeah, so there you go. I don't know why they did that. In the modern version, Mike gets attacked in a hotel and not the library. So when Henry Bowers escapes from the mental institution, he attacks Mike in the hotel, which I found strange. And also, Mike doesn't get stabbed and put in hospital, so the whole point was they went from 6 to 5. That doesn't happen. So there you go. Tom doesn't come to Derry. That's Beverly's husband. In all form. Tom doesn't come to Derry, yet Audra does. So in the 90s version, which did better, they at least included Audra, and they made her part of the plot. Now maybe it just wasn't. I don't think either of the Tom characters were really notable in either version, but having Tom come as well. But then when you read the book, I suppose there's a whole, and this is what I'm talking about, the whole exposition. He went through a whole plot arc to get to Derry, and yet it really didn't pay off when things happened the way they did. So maybe actually, I'm going to change my mind on this. No, I'm just saying it's a change. I'm not sorry. I haven't made up my mind. I just put changes. I haven't made up my mind whether I think they're good or bad. So I'm kind of thinking out there here while we're doing this. Do forgive me. It actually, I think, worked out better having Audra come to Derry on her own, and then it's Pennywise she meets, because in the end, Pennywise can control anybody. Once you cross the state line or the city limits and come in, it's her domain, by the way. In the books, the actual entity is a female, even though Pennywise is a persona. None of the books, that's weird, especially in this day and age, but neither the 90s show or the 2017 brought that up, which I think is a bit weird, because there's a whole thing about if they didn't do it now, and there's a reason in the book why they didn't deal with it now, they were never going to be free. It was going to get worse. But yeah, Pennywise meeting Audra at the petrol station and then kidnapping her, that fell closer in line with the book. But Stephen King made a whole thing about Tom's arc and him getting there, and in fact, it goes together. And in fact, he kidnaps Audra and brings her down to Pennywise, and then for just that, nothing happened. That's why I said I'm frustrated about, because he goes off on these tangents and they really serve no purpose to the main story. I think Tom's character is one of them, and the whole thing where he goes after Kate. They'll get the information and stuff. Just put it out there in a bit, but then it goes nowhere at the end. And then in the 90s version, there's no ritual of Chud. Now, they hinted at it when they go in a circle, linking hands. They did it really, really basically. But they didn't really go into the ritual of Chud in the 90s version. Which, to be honest, even after reading the book, I can understand because, as I said, he spends all the time in these side characters and didn't actually go into the ritual itself. There you go. Okay, so let's look at the 2020s changes. Once again, I've just put what the were between that and the book. I'm not comparing the beats because they're both adapting from the same storyline. So I didn't see, maybe I should clarify my thinking here. I don't see the 2017 29 movies as being a remake of the 90s miniseries. I just see it as a modern adaptation of the book. So that's my thought process in looking at this, because you can't, it's apples and pears, you can't compare the two because one's made for TV, it's done completely different budget, one's made for the big screen, and two separate movies. So part one, chapter one was made, you might not have got chapter two if things had went badly. So you can understand that the medium, and that, like I said, it's translating it. So translating a book into a TV series is different, in my opinion, from translating to a big screen cinema release. So I see TV, cinema, and now streaming as separate mediums because there's separate ways to tell stories. Let me know if you agree with that. It'd be interesting. If you're along the same lines of thought, or do you think it's all the same and one's a copy of the other? So what I'm doing here is 2020 changes from the movies to the books. So first of all, they set it in the 80s and 2000s instead of the 50s and 60s, because in the book it's the 50s, and the 90s show did it in the 50s and then set it in the 80s. But they started in the 80s and then did it like early 2000s, which could be just trying to get the effects or the things, or doing things in the 80s version was like popular now, so maybe they're just jumping on a bandwagon. But it worked. I suppose it did work. There's still a time period between the two. The 80s and the 2000s are still drastically different. And in fact, the 2000s to the 2020s, where we are now, is drastically different. You mightn't think it, but yeah, we're accelerating in terms of especially technology. We're kind of racing ahead of ourselves. Hence why I think we're a bit of a mess, because we've kind of, certain things have taken over and we're kind of holding on and going along for the ride, and we haven't quite adapted our brains to the changes. That might be why we're doing what we do and reacting the way we act. But there you go. The 20s doesn't follow the pattern of the book with the flashbacks. So it has a clear defined chapter one, chapter two. Chapter one set as children, chapter two set as adults. And you know what? That's fair enough. That, like I said, this book, the book's actually convoluted and a bit of a mess in places. It goes off on a lot of tangents. So tidying it up into that works. Especially, like I said, they might have put chapter one out, they may not have got chapter two, but at least if they made a movie, it could still be there, and it might have a chance to make it later down the line. There's always that opportunity, because at least with the time gap and using child actors all in the first one, if they might have got the funds straight away, say it didn't come out to 2020, 2022 or 2023, that's fine, because they made a coherent movie and then the sequel would have followed on. So it makes sense to do it the way they did. It makes it, especially when you go into a cinema, it makes it tidier. When you go to watch a movie, it's completely different from a TV miniseries or a streaming series or anything. You know, it's, you're going there for a beginning, middle, end of a story. Eddie is married in the 2020s version, like the book. He's married, he effectively marries a copy of his mother, and he plays it. But he doesn't own a limo company. He's a loss adjuster, essentially, a risk assessment for an insurance company. I don't get that. There was no real need, apart from me wanting to have a car crash in the first scene. I don't get why. It makes no sense because they were able to portray him as still successful in the 90s version, sticking to the book, and in the book as well. He's still successful, owning a limo company that in a city, New York, I think it was, that is glutted with limo drivers and companies. To be successful shows something was happening to spur him along. So don't get this loss of just their risk assessor thing. Just, nah. Don't get why they did that part, but at least having him married, as opposed to the first version, having him still living with his mother makes more sense. I like the Eddie character, as I said, in the 20 version more. He had more spark to him. He knew deep down, and once again, it's back to that conversation in the hospital after he broke his arm as a kid. He knew what was going on, and he kind of held on to it, but at the same time, he wasn't known by it. He still had that bit of himself, just waiting for the reason to get out. There you go. A weird change they made as well. They made Ben, as a kid, the chronicler instead of Mike. And I don't get why they did that, because Mike still takes over the library. He's the one who still stays. He's the one that keeps the records. So why did they take his character arc and give it to Ben? Ben's character has enough of a character arc of his own without having to take Mike's role in the group. The 90s version played out the bit with the meet, how they meet. Didn't they? God, I can't remember. For flip's sake, I only watched these. History. One played it out better, as in he's running away from Henry. He encounters a kid, he hides, kind of the other kids move on, and then they become friends. So Ben coming into the group doesn't take away from Mike coming into the group later. So I don't know why they took that role away from Mike, because in the end, Mike had the connection. He had his father, and they changed the rules. Well, they had his parents dead for some reason. He's in with the uncle on the farm rather than with his father. It's all, but his father's still alive, because remember the scene later on where his father's in the hospital and he's talking to him. So I don't know why they changed that. It's like the kind of mess with Mike's character as a child. I don't know why. Once again, these are changes that didn't need to happen. It takes away from the story, and there's nothing in terms of effects or cost that warrants the change. Like I said, I don't know why companies do this, but there you go. They made Ben the chronicler, kept because using the story, and because he moved there, he took an interest in Derry, and he chronicled the history, and he had it all up on his walls. But that took away from Mike's role, which I don't get, because it actually made more sense. Because Mike was a chronicler as a youngster, when he went into an adulthood, it made more sense for him to take over the library, because that was the way his mind was. But we didn't get to see that as a kid. So, annoyed me a bit, as you can probably tell. I don't get why they did that. It made no sense. The Ritual of Chud has been adapted to like a Native American / Aztec ritual, rather than the otherworldly one. Now, in fairness, the book does not describe the Ritual of Chud very well. It keeps getting mentioned, but it's not explained. It's kind of left out there in the open. And like I said, that's a infuriating thing about the book, because I'd rather it spent more time on that than these side character chapters disappearing off up the left lane, up the right lane, and not leading anywhere. So you find yourself, you're led up this lane, it just stops, then you have to come all the way back down to the main plot. So Stephen King himself didn't do a good job on explaining the Ritual of Chud. So at least the 20s version had a go at it. I'll give it that. The thing that annoyed me was the deception. I don't know why they felt the need to do that. When Mike brings them as adults and try to do the ritual, and he lies to them so the ritual fails. Anyone that understands magical practice and magical workings knows that honesty and intention are 100% necessary for invoking magic. If you're dishonest with yourself, if you're dishonest about what you actually want, your desires, if you're dishonest with other practitioners, if it's a group ritual or an individual, if there's dishonesty there, it's actually going to backfire on you. It just did, but I don't know why the movie felt the need to do that. It didn't, for a bit of drama, I suppose, but kind of took away from, once again, it's like they've dumped Mike's character in this version, and I don't know why. What's he done? Mike was a good character. He's a good character in the book. He's a good character. He portrays a good character in the 90s version, but they've kind of dumped on his character in this iteration. I don't know why. It's just, what did he do to you? There you go. That was that. And then Henry Bars, he kills Victor and Belch. You see him where he's cut their throats, but they actually got killed in the sewers. And then the whole thing with Henry is that because he ran away, Victor was being killed, and he ran away to save himself. That's why Victor stays in his mind more than Belch, because he feels guilty because he actually watched what happened. He didn't see what happened to Belch, but he saw what happened to Victor, and then in fear he ran away, and that's why Victor essentially, it uses Victor's persona, like Georgie with Bill. It uses Georgie's essence or visions to torment Bill. It does the same thing with Victor. He uses Victor to torment Henry. And that's the main changes in the 20s. So what I've done next is changes both versions have made. So they both made the same change from the source material. Not too many, but it's interesting. Derry is not destroyed at the end, so when they have the final confrontation and they take out the heart and gets killed, there's a whole... Now, I can understand why, because of cost, because this actually goes on for about a chapter and a half of sewers exploding and people dying and the place flooding and the place, the actual, sinkholes appearing and stuff. So this would be the equivalent of like an earthquake disaster movie happening to the city of Derry. So I can understand why not. In the 20s version, they destroyed Norbert Lane, so that was kind of the visual of the house. It looked horrible, I have to say that. That was the most horrible CGI. It was not Neibolt Street, the house crumbling in itself. Poltergeist 1977 did a better job of the house collapsing in itself. So how does it look worse than CGI of a house collapsing inwards? I don't know, but it does. It looks terrible. They didn't do it in the 90s version. So both, they didn't have anything getting destroyed. Once again, TV, they have even less budget than a movie. So it makes sense. Mike's parents being killed didn't happen. Mike still, because we had a lot of conversation with Mike and his dad, and it was actually Mike's father and his grandfather as well. He had the 3 generations talking to him about the evils in Derry, but it was told his father was an ex-serviceman, Air Force, I believe, during World War II. So he had those stories, and he was able to tell the black spot. He was alive during when the black spot got burnt down. He's able to tell his son about it, and then on his deathbed, essentially, or towards the end of his life, he had the actual honest conversation about the black spot while he was on his bed, because he figured Mike was old enough. So the kind of, by getting rid of Mike, like I said, the 20s version shit Mike's character completely, which was annoying. But thankfully, the actors did a decent job and were able to power through it, even though the character was shit on. 90s version, I just think it was a limitation of time why I didn't do it. But Bev wasn't kidnapped, and she didn't see the deadlights. I don't know. They put that in the 20s version. Did they do it in the 90s version as well? Yeah. But she wasn't. They just put both versions. I think put that in there, which was the Elevate best character, but she didn't need Elevator because she was a cool character. Like I said, the portrayal in the 90s version was slightly weaker, I think, in the 20s version, but putting that in to make the rest of the group go to rescue her, I think it was better if it had been played out like the book. They were determined, they kind of understood that they had to do this because of not the turtle, but the other entity. The opposite of its, was working. It's a whole while the forces of evil work, the force is good too. So the other force was pushing them. So they had this driving notion anyway. And they didn't play on that. Neither version really played on the other force for good leading them, which was a bit of a shame. There was something there. Wee bit of hope during the thing. Yeah, so I don't get why that. Yeah, it was cool seeing and all, but I don't get why that felt it necessary. Patrick Hockstetter's character is completely glossed over on both versions. Now, Patrick Hockstetter actually makes Henry look like a normal human being. He was gone. He's a disturbed individual. Maybe he's too disturbed. Especially the whole thing with the refrigerator and his hobby. But Henry knew about it and kind of shows evil. The fact that Patrick was able to exist as a character shows how the malevolence of Derry worked. The fact that somebody like him hadn't been institutionalized or caught out shows the power that it has on its feeding ground. Bit of a waste of a character, not to be utilized. But there you go. Maybe it was just a time thing because, yeah, I suppose he's quite a disturbing character. So maybe it was definitely a bit much for TV to show him in his full glory. Probably a bit much for you'd have to be toned down and watered down. I know he was shown in like a poster on the second one, but they didn't really. That was it. He had definitely the most memorable arc with the three of them, and he was actually creeping out the three, Henry, Belch, and Victor. He actually creeped them out. That's how bad he was. He was almost like an apprentice to Pennywise. He could have been Pennywise's apprentice. And then finally, no mention of the sex ritual that they took part in. The 90s version hinted at. That's why I'm saying Annette O'Toole's character was a bit the way she was when they met up against adults. She was playing into they'd already been intimate with each other, if that makes sense. So the way she played with them as adults and the way she kissed them, for example, and she was letting them rub her shoulders and stuff. They had that. You could see that bond was there. They weren't just strangers. It was more than friendship. And I think she played that through very subtly in the 90s version. What's her name? Jessica didn't play that out at all. No hint of that. The only thing we got was her lustily looking at Bill, but then the whole discovery of Ben wrote the poem. They played that bit out, but they didn't play that. Now, I understand why they wouldn't go through the actual act. You don't want to. It's one thing to write something down. There's one thing to actually have child actors play out something like that. That's fucking wrong. Do you know what I mean? There's no mission. Hence why a lot of slasher movies use 30-year-old teens. It's kind of funny as well, but yeah, nobody wants to see that. Actually played out, but I'm just noting here as a fact that both versions left it out, and it's understandable why. It's only a page and a half anyway. It's not like I know people make a big thing about it, but it's only a page and a half and doesn't really go too far. And there was a reason behind it. It kind of made sense, and nobody was misused, if that makes sense. So, for one, but it's not. I don't think it's something that's vitally important. It needs to be in a TV show. I don't want to watch kids fucking doing anything, so I'm happy with that. Kids be kids. But horror, that's the whole point of horror. Horror pushes boundaries. Horror takes things and is that disturbing thought. And that's why you've got different mediums. There's things you can do in books that you maybe can't do in graphic novels. These are kind of the right books, obviously, maybe you can fill in the blanks. Then you've got comics / graphic novels. You can maybe do a bit more, but then when you go into actual video, TV, now you can release something as a DVD and have a warning and stuff. You know, that's why you've got adult movies and all. But once something becomes released for the general populace, even if you label it and all that kind of stuff, you're taking a risk. And once again, there's one thing between anime and animation, for example, because you're not dealing with live people. The minute you're dealing with live people or animals, that's, you know what I mean, that's, you have to have a bit of consideration. Like I said, there's no horror movie we're going to actually go in and chop people up, because, nah. Although, at the moment, the way Hollywood is, it might be a bad idea. Right, anyway. That's what thoughts on that. We'll leave that there. So, finally, what did I think was better? I can't say one was better than the other, honestly. So I've taken a few points here, but I genuinely can't say, oh, the movies did it better than the TV series, or the book was the best because the book has its feelings. I think both versions are better than the book. And they had to make strategic decisions what to leave in and leave out. So both tried their best. As I mentioned, the things that were odd, why they changed them or left them out, I didn't see the purpose when there's enough material to play with and a storyline, and they were actually made correct decisions for what they did, and they gave both the miniseries and the movies their own flavor, which means you can enjoy them both separately and you don't have to compare them to each other, if that makes sense. But young Henry, his insanity and his hatred and the fact it was working on him, I think the 20s movies did it better. I didn't enjoy his young character in the 90s. He was just cardboard cutout, bully type, pointless thing. Pennywise's final form, the 20s movies did it better. Although the actual, sorry, I'll get on that bit, right. I found it very disappointing. Now, I know it was a TV series. I know there are limitations. But even when I watched this, what age was I in the 90s? Flipping early 20s? Yeah, late teens, early 20s. But yeah, I'm still a young lad. I remember being disappointed seeing the final form of it. I was like, oh, is that it? It looked, even for the 90s, it didn't look good. I was very lackluster. However, on the flip side of that, Pennywise's death, I'll have to give the 90s version. Although the actual scene of them fighting the spider form, they were able to do it better in 20s version because of CGI, but the actual ending of it, when they pushed the spider over in the 90s and they're actually digging him, now they do this off camera and you see it in the shadows, that had more impacted me. And even rewatching it again, of them just going animalistic and ripping his heart out and them all holding it above their heads. They actually went full guttural animal, and you got that sense in the 90s TV series. In the 20s movies, it was a bit flat. It was almost like they were lovingly caressing the heart, and he's like, "Oh, look at you, you've all grown up." And just, I thought the 20s version fell flat. The Young Losers in general, as I probably explained, they're a mixed bag. Some are better than others. They trade better. Can't really say this group were terrible, this group were great. Wouldn't be fair to do that. In case by case basis, I've already said, like Stan's character, Beverly's character, the other two that kind of stuck out. What they did with Mike's character as a kid, I don't like, but it wasn't the betrayal by the actors. So it's mixed bag, so that's kind of 50-50, they balance each other out. The Adult Losers, I think the 20s TV show the 20s movies did a better job of them as adults, apart from the one or two I mentioned. I don't know. It just in the 90s as novels, it just felt they were not as apart from, like I said, apart from the ones I mentioned. But I think the 20s gets this one, just the way that the adults come in and work together, and probably because they have more of an action sequence and that, and but more of a struggle, or it seemed kind of rushed or sort of sleepwalking along. Don't know. Just I'll give it the 20s version. Not that I hate the 90s, if that makes sense. The backstory of the Malevolence of Derry. I think the 90s series did a bit better. I think they just managed to get that essence more. They did it a bit in the 20s, but it was glossed over, kind of rushed. That really went in it. I think the 90s actually did a better job. The Ritual of Chud, I'm going to give to the 90s because I didn't like the way they portrayed it, and I didn't like the betrayal aspect of the ritual that made it feel where they had it. Like the book doesn't explain it properly. The book actually is weak in terms of it anyway. So I wasn't no writers. A writer's basically start from scratch. Movie script writer. There's not much to work with there. But yeah, just that feeling they knew they had to do, but didn't know why. The way it worked. Plus, at the end, the promise that definitely gave that to the 90s because when they did the scene, that they're not going to slit each other's hands, but with the effect and pulling it away, looked better. When they did it with the CGI, it was like the piece of glass went straight through the hand. It was just ridiculous. It was like if you actually put something right through your hand, you're damaging and destroying. There's all your flipping tendons, your metatarsals are there. You're not stabbing something through it and then having function in your hand. Where the difference between blood packed, but when you see it in the 20s version, it's like flipping stabbing right through it. It's like, oh, come on, man. There's too much left to post production. And finally, the Turtle and the Other Presents. Neither version did it right. Both glossed over it. 20s mentioned a wee bit, but not really. Even the book didn't do a good job. They wasted too much time in character expositions and side plots. They actually go through the entities that were involved. Yeah, they did the... Oh, there's another thing that flipping changed. The smokehouse. So, they did it in the ritual. God, I forgot about it. I didn't even put that one down. Didn't even do it in an 90s show of the scene in the smoke, the clubhouse where they did the smoke ritual from Native American rituals where they sit in the smoke and go on a vision quest. They didn't do that at all. They tried to do it in the 20s version, but they made it part of the ritual of Chud, and where you see it actually landing on Earth millions of years ago. They did it as a quick vision, but they didn't do that whole scene, which was a bit of a shame because there was a good character development moment when they did something daft. But, it was a childish idea, but it actually had purpose behind it and it turned into something else. So there you go. And that's what they're trying to discover what it was and how to fight it. So there you go. There's my dive. Had a look at both. I tried to be as fair as possible, and I'm trying not to go in with blinkered. This is better than the other. I enjoyed both versions. I'll give it that. They're rewatchable, definitely. You can go into it. The book, I wouldn't be too keen to read it again. Because it was just too much faffing about. That need to be cut down. That need to be edited and cut down to a slimmer storyline. It's over 1,000 pages of guff where the storyline kind of gets lost with all these side plots. That's my main complaint. But there you go. Let me know what you think. Do you agree, disagree, certain aspects? Did I leave something out that I didn't discuss? Yeah, interested to hear what you think. So, sorry, but a long one. There's a lot to unpack, you think there's 8 hours worth of material, watching material at least, and about 1,000-page book, 1,000+ page book. It was quite a bit to take in over the time and try and distill into short conversation. But yeah, let us know what you think. Do more reviews and more episodes going up, so keep up with the channel, do the tidy clicky things. Until next time, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.